Hi, this is David Allen Greer. This podcast consists of some questions and, I hope, some answers about flipping or inverting the classroom. It is preceded by 3 other podcasts on the same subject, and if you've not seen those, you may want to look at them first, because this podcast will begin with a question.
The first question concerns reading. It says, you do not mention reading as a means to get ready for the class, and the question is why. I mentioned it a little, and I probably need to mention it more. Reading is still very important to the inverted classroom. In fact, the inverted classroom gives you the opportunity to use reading materials in an entirely new way. You should still consider having them for your class, but you can use multimedia, and in particular audio, to make reading much more effective. You can guide a student through the reading, emphasize things that are important, highlight issues that are difficult, and help them set up problems that they need to solve. You can sit at the same textbook that they have, at the same page, and discuss it in an audio file and draw their attention to those exact points that I mentioned. So in that sense, reading can become much more effective. You can also include it directly without looking at pages and guiding them through it. You can ask questions of reading. You can suggest materials for them to consider. You can, in particular, guide them to certain parts of the web through URLs on your multimedia. It helps them look at the material in greater depth and use it in more creative ways. So I very much support the use of reading in the inverted classroom, and in particular, I support it as part of your lecture preparation, part of the material that you distribute to the class. Question 2 deals with participation. We can force every student to participate, but not everyone is equally motivated or interested in the subject. How do you deal with that? This is not that different from any other class. In any other form of teaching, you have students who are not equally interested or motivated. While I do try to call on every student every day, or certainly every week, I don't call on them equally. I identify as quickly as I can the students who are motivated and who are interested and use them to drive the class forward. I also identify the students who seem to be reluctant to participate or don't seem very interested in what they're doing, and try to use that reluctance to focus the class. Focus the class on issues that are important and issues that help the whole group understand things. I'll never identify students as being uninterested in public, but I'll often call on them in a way that asks them what they thought the most important point was, what they think the issues that we are discussing mean, and use their answers to try to elevate the class and get them to focus on things. If they stumble around, which they often do, and don't have a quick answer, you can question them a bit. Ask them what was the last point they understood, what they thought the arc of today's class was going to be when you started. You can also play these students against the more engaged and active students, though you have to be careful and do it in the most loving of ways. Get the unengaged students to pose questions, to say what they last understood or what they don't understand, and get the other students to answer it. To me, one of the underlying principles is to get the students as a whole working together and solving the problems, and you're acting as coach, as guide, as mediator, as someone who's trying to motivate them as a whole to master the material and to understand its importance. Our third question is in a related vein. How about students that are not motivated by this type of learning? Shouldn't we vary teaching styles? My answer to this is yes and no, but it's not being equivocal. It is really emphasizing the benefits of this style of teaching. I'm aware that I'm very good at this style of teaching, that it fits me very naturally, that I enjoy it, and have gotten good effect out of it. I'm aware it's not for everyone. At the same time, I think some of the elements of it will benefit everybody. In particular, I think the use of multimedia can be of benefit to every teacher, no matter how they find this method or what method of teaching they are good at doing. In particular, you can use multimedia to put down basic ideas for the students and let them listen to it or watch it in preparation for the lecture. Then go over it in a lecture or in a question and answer format that is perhaps not as open and freewheeling as I do it, that still gets the students engaged, that still underlines the difficulties and the solutions to those difficulties. The way that I address readings can be particularly useful to everyone, no matter what. Sitting down with your computer and guiding a student through the readings, emphasizing the point that is important. Surely I suspect that almost all of you have been in the circumstance when you have been working with a student, perhaps in an office hour, and it dawned on you that they did not understand the reading, that they may have actually tried very hard to understand it, but they were focusing on the wrong concepts, they didn't understand the major thrust of the section, and they didn't know what to do with the results. Multimedia, audio and video I should add, can be very powerful tools for guiding students through the material and getting them ready for your lectures if you are better at being a traditional lecturer. At the same time, I believe that all of you can make this style of teaching work and make it work well and engage the students more in a question and answer discussion kind of format, which is, at base, what Inverting the Classroom is. Question 4 builds on the last 2 questions. When using flipped classrooms, how can we be sensitive to students who are introverts and who do not tend to strive in large groups or being put on the spot? I have a couple thoughts about this. First and foremost, by surrendering to the idea that students are incapable of working in a group or so introverted that they can't participate, you are in fact doing them no favors. We all know that in scientific work, there are group projects, there are group discussions, there's debate, and everyone needs to participate. Otherwise, projects run into trouble. So you need to help these students move forward, move out of themselves, recognize that their work requires it, and help them develop some skill at it. At the same time, not all roles are for all people. Not all students are there to be leaders or to lead discussion. The techniques that you use are similar to those of dealing with students who are not motivated. You identify those who are, you're aware of those who aren't, and try and get the 2 groups to work together. With students who are shy or introverted, it's important to let them be successful. Sometimes it involves giving them easier problems, but this doesn't work forever with shy students. They will quickly recognize that you are giving them easy questions and can get resentful at it. So you have to work to create an environment in which it's comfortable to fail, in which anyone, even a shy student, can start to answer a challenging or difficult question and know that if they get it wrong, they will not be condemned or even embarrassed in front of their peers. You have to support them, you have to be grateful for their contribution, and you have to move the discussion forward in a way that doesn't highlight or demand personal failure. It is sometimes quite useful to put some of the shyer students in groups or identify them as part of a team together. Often they will cling to each other out of solidarity and perhaps out of a need for mutual support. You can help them work as a group, because ultimately they're going to have to if they are going to be involved in a technical career. In my career, I can recall one student who was so shy and so anxious that I never really reached him. On his evaluations of the class, he called me a bully who took great delight in embarrassing students in front of the class. You have to look at circumstances like that as the part of teaching where you don't win by getting a good review, where your goal is not to have people agree with you. Your goal is to help these students see themselves as better. And sometimes you don't get that lesson across in the classroom period. Sometimes it has to percolate, sometimes it has to push their character forward in a way that the lessons are learned in subsequent courses. Teaching by inverting the classroom ultimately means you are pushing students publicly and that you are going to get resistance. The key issue is to know that you're there doing this for the students' best interests and that you are so concerned about them. You want them to demonstrate the skills that they will need to deal with others when they start their technical career. Our last question involves the transition. What's the best way to manage the transition to the flipped classroom? Is it better for a particular course to go all in for the term, or to do it only for a few classes? My feeling is that even when you're starting a new course, that there's a transition period in which you need to build both your library of multimedia materials and your skill and understanding of how to apply this technique to your class. In particular, I have tended to evolve my way into an inverted classroom. I do this first by building my multimedia library to make sure that I have the background material to do it, and also by doing the short podcast that summarizes the week. Those two things have been very important to me in my teaching. You may also discover that you don't need to embrace the full radical inversion or flipping that I do. If you've got a technically heavy course that has a lab and a discussion or problem period with a teaching assistant, you may discover that what you want to do is set aside part of your lecture for an inverted or flipped classroom, for doing things that don't answer questions as you would in a problem session, but do things to illustrate your lectures, to help the students see the overarching goal of the class, to see how the individual pieces fit into that goal, and help them build their own cognitive model of what they are doing, where they are going, and how they can use each little bit of your lecture, of your materials, of the book, of the problems in the lab as well, to understand the material and make it work effectively. So you may ultimately only flip or invert part of your work. You may only take part of your standard lecture period and only treat that time as an inverted classroom. That part may be enough, a half hour, 20 minutes, more or less, to engage the students more. However, that procedure may also ultimately be a stepping stone to a full inversion, to a flipped classroom where you spend most of the traditional lecture period illustrating, highlighting, emphasizing the key aspects of the material, and doing it in a way that's student-driven, that's back and forth, that's engaged, that is an engagement between you and them. Ultimately, I would suggest a piece-by-piece approach, and you may discover that you only need to use certain of the pieces to make your teaching more effective.
I would like to leave you with one specific idea about inverting or flipping the classroom. That idea is that this technique is one specific teaching technique, and it has a specific goal in mind. The goal is to give you time to spend more of your effort with individual students or students in groups to help them guide their learning. It's a technique that allows you more interaction, and in particular, the kind of interaction that leads to self-discovery, self-study, and self-instruction. As you look at your classes and consider where you might deploy it, you'll remember that you have a number of techniques at your disposal. You have the lecture, you have the quiz section, you have the laboratory. All of these have specific goals and should be used to meet those goals. However, when you're looking at your class and remembering that there are times you need to teach them how to learn, how to engage the material better, that's the point when you will see it could be a good opportunity to flip the classroom, to invert your interaction with students. I want to wish you well in your endeavor. It has been a very good technique for me, and I have enjoyed using it, and I think I have seen the results of its power. I would look forward to hearing from you, to hearing of your questions, and also hearing of your successes. This is David Allen Greer, talking about the inverted or flipped classroom. Take care.